is happening, everybody? It is Friday heading into noon right here, and I'm pretty excited for this because, well, I'm not excited because Lofty isn't here, although he just had a child that was born, so that is very exciting. So shout out to Lofty. He posted about it on Twitter, posted some pictures of it, but I very rarely get to do shows with Chris Spags anymore. Him and I used to do shows together all the time on the YouTube channel. There was a point in time where I did more shows with Spags than anybody around here. It's been about a year since him and I did a show together, and actually, a picture from that show is the header on my Twitter page because it was a very, very important moment in the YouTube channel history where Spags and I undressed Puppet Lindquist and we figured out what was beneath the clothes of Eric's embodied spirit in a puppet. We found out it looked exactly like him in real life, just absolutely nothing underneath, which was great. We were able to figure that out. And now Spags and I doing another show together here. We're going to be breaking down the NFL slate, looking at the Sims, and we're going to be looking at the main slate. But if you guys do have any questions about Showdown, you could throw that in as well. All of us are undefeated on Friday Showdown contest. If you guys could do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Vivid, who is sponsoring the show today. Spags, what's up, man? Thanks for filling in today.
I'm excited to be here. I didn't even know, actually, when Greg highlighted that his Twitter banner was a photo of me pulling down the pantaloons of Puppet Lindquist. And then to see that again, it just brought me back to a happier place of when I could strip a puppet on camera and feel like I was still being a professional and doing my job. But excited to be here with you. I'm excited for Lofty as well. Continues to raise young women that can be sires potentially for my son, Luca. That's really, I think, why he's doing it. But I'm glad to be here with you, Greg. Fun to do a show as always.
Yeah, and it's always nice too whenever we could get together, we can make fun of Eric because we really do love Eric on a deep level. And I've told him many times that I hope that I get to be a pallbearer at his funeral. I hope I get to give a speech there. Like, that's the kind of connection we have. He's that important to me. Like, I really feel like he's somebody that's a part of our lives, which is why we've got puppets made of him and all that. But we've got a slate coming up here, Spags, and it's a little bit smaller, right? Because there's a Friday afternoon game, which is just, great scheduling by the NFL. They're always on the ball with this kind of stuff. Friday, 3 p.m. There's going to be a live before lock for that today as well at 2 p.m. So 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have a show for that. And then there's also the Thanksgiving slate. So we have a little bit smaller of a slate on Sunday. Just in general, do you have any big picture thoughts about Sunday's slate? And if not, we could get right into looking at some of the Sims and the results and the lineups.
Yeah, I would say for me, the Sunday slate just doesn't look that fun. I think we've kind of lost some of the more appealing games where we had the leverage plays, the lower owned outcome yesterday with Green Bay putting it on the Detroit Lions pretty aggressively, which I would have loved to play in the main slate. Christian Watson finally has a good game, and it has to be on kind of an island scenario. But same thing for the Commanders, a team we know we can attack every week. When Tommy DeVito's beating up on you, that's a matchup you can go to. Obviously, that one didn't work out necessarily to go overstacking, but I think you kind of knew that if you look at the projections, people are going to be pushed a little bit too hard towards the Cowboys. For the main slate, though, it's like there's nothing fun. Like, I think there's a few marquee matchups. The Buffalo game against Philadelphia is going to be one that probably is going to be interesting to watch from a football perspective and should have a little more offense given how bad Buffalo's D is. But I feel like this is a slate where Jonathan Taylor's the chalk, and I don't believe that. Like, I don't want that to be the case. So I really have no feel for the slate. I'm actually curious to see what the Sims are going to tell us.
Yeah, so one of the things that Lofty and I have been doing on this show is we go in pretty blind. There was a point in time where I would be recording videos for the main slate and looking at the Sims before the show. But now I like to be surprised and see what our data ends up getting to us, and we react to it live right here on the show. And by the way, want to answer, we've got Bonga Smoke, who's left about 4 or 5 messages asking where the NBA show is. It already happened. It was on before this. So if you're looking for the NBA show, you can just go to the YouTube channel and check, and it's right there. There's also going to be 2 other NBA shows later today. So we got 3 NBA shows. One of them's already happened. Don't worry, we're covering NBA on here as well. But Jacob, if you could be so kind, pull the Sims up on the screen. And I want to start here by looking at what our number one overall best projected lineup is. And the way that we typically start by sorting the lineups here is by the simulated ROI. And we see what is the number one overall best projected lineup. And what we have here is actually a Rams triple stack. Matthew Stafford, Jonathan Taylor, Royce Freeman is in it. So we just did see Darrell Henderson no longer with the Rams. I was a little surprised by that they ended up going with Royce Freeman sticking on the roster as opposed to Henderson. Juju Smith-Schuster, Puka Nacua, Chris Godwin, Evan Ingram, Cooper Kupp, the Patriots defense. So there are a lot of moving parts here, Spags. In particular, we need an update on the status of Cooper Kupp. And then also something that we've seen come up a lot in the Sims that Lofty and I discuss here, but I've never really talked with you about it. Our number one overall projected lineup for this weekend is a triple stack. How often are you inclined, if at all, to get to triple stacks, or do you try to filter them out of the Sims, or how do you approach them?
I'm a little more willing to get to them. I guess it depends on the team that we're going to, but I think early in the year, they weren't the best plays. They were coming up a lot with the Sims because, a lot of the triple stacks would come up as sort of a Sim process because that is when you're hitting the nuts. You're getting that right. But I think earlier in the year, the data isn't strong enough to feel the most confident in going to a QB +3. For right now, I'm willing to go to them a little bit more. I mean, we've seen them take down the big tournaments. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, Utica won it with the Texans triple in that one. So I'm willing to go there for Stafford in particular as a QB. Like if he is creating outlier production to be the winning QB, he has to be really passing in an outlier way to his receivers. So I think that makes some sense. I don't know about Royce Freeman in a week where we're getting Kyron Williams back, but as a concept, like I think it's okay. I kind of prefer QB +2s, maybe QB +2 with a bring back, but in a 150 set, absolutely, I'd be playing some QB +3s.
Yeah, let me check our projections. We might still have Kyron Williams out. And then, I mean, still, there's a lot of moving parts with the Rams, which I was kind of mentioning before also, because of the fact that Cooper Kupp also, I don't know what your feel is on Cooper Kupp, but to me, I know he's listed as questionable. He returned to a limited practice yesterday. I don't know if that makes him a guarantee to play just because this team has been really cautious with Kupp this year. They started the year with him being on the injured reserve. We know he has an injury history as well. And it's not like this team is so super competitive that they're like a guaranteed playoff team or anything like that. So they might end up being cautious with Kupp. We could also see Kupp play, potentially limited snaps if he's out there on the field. But what's your feel on Cooper Kupp and his status heading into this weekend?
I mean, I think he's not going to go, to be my guess. I know the most recent practice reports that he wasn't going with the ankle injury. I would expect it to be a spot where they rest him just because, I mean, I have this issue with the Rams. I know they won last week, and I know they're technically still live for a playoff spot, but like it feels pretty narrow for them. And I haven't checked, the actual odds of them making the playoffs recently, so I could be off base on that one. But it feels like they're playing themselves just into a worse pick right now. And obviously, Arizona, same case on the other side of this game as well for the Rams. I don't love the situation with Cooper Kupp heading into this one where I just don't expect him to play. But I think that makes Puka a more appealing play. I just don't think you'd actually want a triple stack with anybody else besides Cooper Kupp if he's going to be out.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to look right now per the question you had asked about their odds to make the playoffs. So just really quickly pulled up FanDuel here, and I'm going to sort by the Rams. And yeah, they are minus 600 to miss the playoffs. So the overwhelming expectation, this is not going to be a playoff team. They're not playing to win games right now. And I'm kind of on the same page as you, where I don't think Cooper Kupp is going to end up playing. Actually, Jacob, can you unfavorite those lineups? Let's just remove Rams stacks. If you unfavorite the top 150 and then click on the three, I don't even know what you call it, like the ellipses there, but next to the stack a little bit to the left, and then just filter and then does not contain Rams, LAR. Stack, yeah, does not contain LAR. Yeah, now favorite the top 150. And so now we're in a situation where it's like, all right, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen with the wide receivers. Maybe Kupp plays, maybe doesn't. But at least for now, we could take those out and look at what some of these other lineups look like. And when we do that, Spags, our number one projected lineup in here is now Jalen Hurts, Jonathan Taylor, still Royce Freeman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Smith, Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, A.J. Brown, Patriots defense. So this is one that I think is probably going to be a lot more palatable to people looking at this, where we have an Eagles double stack with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both working their way into it. And it is one with, Royce Freeman notwithstanding, because I'm with you. I don't really want to play Royce Freeman if Williams does end up playing, which I do think is the most likely scenario. The rest of the lineup, I'm pretty cool with, though.
Yeah, I think that one looks okay. The Jonathan Taylor part, I'm actually a little bit intrigued by the Gardner Minshew stack underneath that one, just because I think that you can maybe get some leverage on Jonathan Taylor ownership where, this is a Bucs D. It's not the same Bucs D as it's been in recent years where it was this shutdown run defense that you don't want to play anybody against. And if guys got there, it's kind of outlier days that involved a lot of pass catching. The Christian McCaffrey one against the Bucs a couple years ago where he was going nuts. Nobody wanted to play him against the Bucs, and he still got there because he just got a lot of checkdowns instead. I think that's still, not the exact same situation, but it is a tough Bucs D that I don't expect Jonathan Taylor to find it easy to get there, but he's going to be owned about by a third of the field, it looks like, based on the Stokastic data, as well as around the industry. So I'm intrigued by the Gardner Minshew one a little bit more than the Hurts one, just because I think the Hurts one's going to be pretty obvious. He's on the thumbnail here. I think he's going to be on the thumbnail of a lot of content out there, which will mean that people get pushed more towards Eagle stacks in a gross week. So I think, to me, this is like the gross stack week where you play Minshew, maybe you play Will Levis or Bryce Young in that one spot where it has two teams that don't defend the pass very well, don't defend much very well. I think it's a gross week, but I think the Sims, obviously, pushing you towards stars is never going to be a surprise.
Yeah, and we got people in the chat who are asking why does the data, why do the Sims, why does the industry like Jonathan Taylor so much? And just looking at a lot of our top lineups, it does appear he's in them. So I'm going to expect that he is probably a chalk piece that we're getting to a lot in our lineups. But I mean, the main reason that we're getting to Jonathan Taylor is this is somebody who not all that long ago, 2 years ago, was considered the best fantasy player that we had in football. Like he was what Christian McCaffrey is this year. That's what Jonathan Taylor was considered a couple of years ago. Now, what's happened since then? I bought a helmet of Jonathan Taylor, and it's actually right behind me over my left shoulder. And he's been nothing but dog shit ever since then. He can't stay healthy on the field. He's hurt all the time, but he's finally healthy now. And Zach Moss is no longer really relevant. So Moss got off to a great start to the year, but you look at recent games, and it's hardly Zach Moss getting on the field, like not getting snaps, not getting touches. Jonathan Taylor's now getting the lion's share of the work in the backfield, and he's not priced as the same he was a couple of years ago. So that's really the reason that people are primarily getting to Jonathan Taylor. Is there anything you would add to that, Spags?
28 in the red zone allowed, which is going to be definitely not the prettiest numbers to be going against for Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor can get some pass game work. As Greg mentioned, he has really basically vanquished Zach Moss, the shadow realm, where Moss is getting a lot of work early on. Now it is just all Taylor out there. But I would rather attack this team with the passing offense. Again, 0.05 EPA per dropback, 0.05 EPA per pass allowed by Tampa's defense. They also struggled downfield, 0.54 EPA on throws to 20-plus air yards. They give this up at a pretty good rate, a 6% rate as well. The matchup just isn't like a run funnel matchup. It's a pass funnel matchup. And that's why it's really interesting to me to see that Taylor ownership. And I get what he is as a play, like he's a 20 touchback in a league where there's not a lot of 20 touchbacks anymore. But I'd rather go the Minshew route, I think, for this one.
By the way, you were muted for about half of that, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I actually went in manually unmuted. I don't know if you had muted yourself at one point or if
no, I saw it click and I was like, I don't know. There was like a spinning wheel. I don't know. We're in StreamYard. We're not in the luxurious world of OBS. We usually are. So I get it.
No, this is the world of us navigating StreamYard, and then occasionally me self-producing shows on my own, which I know you do via StreamYard as well. So it sometimes just does weird shit on its own. So whether you muted yourself or maybe Jacob was like, fuck Spags.
I didn't touch anything. I'm inculpable here. Nobody can blame me for muting, but you missed the meta if you had me muted. So I guess everybody missed out all the great plays.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that it's just Jacob was like, I want Lofty back. It was just like, screw whatever Spags has to say and just press the mute button so that he couldn't hear you at all. But I unmuted you once I realized what was happening about halfway through what you were talking about. But I was very confused looking around. I didn't know, did my internet drop out? How come I don't hear anything? How come I don't see anything? There's just a spinning wheel. But we've got it sorted out and everybody could hear you now. Most importantly, can see you in the money hat as well. Something else that's going to be pretty notable, if you guys aren't aware, it's Black Friday today. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. Lots of deals going on. And that includes here at Stokastic.com, where if you guys are new to the Sims tool, if you sign up using the link below, you're going to get 50% off the Sims tool. And this is good for our football package. It's good for our NBA package and everything we have included in our base packages now. So if you're signing up for NFL, if you're signing up for NBA, you're getting the contest generator so you could build your lineups on our site. You're getting the Sims tool. You could simulate all those lineups. And then, of course, player projections, ownership projections. That is all included as well. Now, we also ran that Millie promo last week because we did have a member win $1 million. And it was something else that we thought that we wanted to celebrate. So we did that 30% off Millie sale. And we don't want anybody to be left out. So if you did sign up using the Millie promo, you are going to be emailed a coupon so that when your current subscription expires, you could re-up using the 50% off coupon for the Sims discount. So promo code SIMS, SIMS, that's all capital letters, 50% off when you sign up for the first time. You get access to all the tools and data that Spags and I are showing you guys on screen right now. So let's go back and look at some of those top lineups here, Jacob. And I'm going to make this bigger on my screen so I could see it as well. And like you mentioned there, Spags, we do have that Colts triple stack that's showing up near the top of our lineups. We've also got a handful of other Eagle stacks that are showing up as single lineups. So let's make some guesses here because we're going to sort by exposures here in a second. We'll look at the quarterbacks that we're getting the most of. Which QB, just based on some of these top lineups we have here, do you expect that we're going to end up getting the most exposure to?
I would think it's going to be Jalen Hurts based on the team total. I haven't. Let me look at Kansas City's real fast. Kansas City, we're seeing pop up a little bit here. Matchup against Vegas is one as well. Or I guess where you get some Mahomes, but Mahomes' price tag and the stackability, I think maybe not as appealing to the Sims overall. So if I had to guess, I would say chalk Hurts, probably more ownership for Mahomes than would be comfortable. And it does feel like Minshew's coming up a lot more than I would have guessed based on the Jonathan Taylor ownership. So I think those would probably be the top three.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed that comes up a pretty good amount in our data is when there is a running back with pass catching ability, they'll show up as a stacking option with quarterbacks pretty consistently. We'll see that happen a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of get like a combination, Spags, of the things that you liked and what the data might like. Also, is even though it looks like we're getting to a ton of a chalk Jonathan Taylor, I do think those lineups are a lot more contrarian if they include Gardner Minshew with Jonathan Taylor and maybe one of the Colts pass catchers as well. Is that a build you have an issue with if it's Minshew with Jonathan Taylor and another pass catcher?
No, I know there's been some back testing this year where I still do some bringbacks and all of that. You can see them on the screen. You could actually filter them as well if you want to do QBs +2 with a bringback, QBs +3 with 1 or 2 bringbacks. You could do it that way. But I found that there was some back testing data as well. And this is people who smarter than me that have done it on social media. There's a strong correlation between people on the same team and not quite as strong of a correlation between the performance on your team and then the main stack and then also the bringbacks. So like Jonathan Taylor could get there even if he's not catching passes, where it could just be a lot of production for Michael Pittman, for Josh Downs, for I guess one of the tight ends. Probably not going to get a lot of the tight ends, but you see these guys that move the ball downfield, and Jonathan Taylor just punches it in, and they're not really directly correlated. But because the Indianapolis Colts is maybe having a game environment that's going to have an outlier day that Taylor can get there. So I'm willing to go to Taylor more, I think, in those kind of builds where you're getting a little bit different with it. Whereas I think if you're just playing Taylor straight away, like I might be inclined to fade the ownership if he's going to be owned by a third of the field and you're not stacking up or trying to get the game environment right.
Yeah, and let's see Jonathan Taylor's involvement in the passing game this year. Only one target last week, but before then, well, actually 2 weeks ago because they were on the bye. But before then, we saw him. He did get targeted 5 times, caught 5 passes for 22 yards. We saw him against Cleveland, 4 catches for 45 yards, 6 targets against Jacksonville, 5 catches for 46 yards. So he's very much been involved in the passing game. We've seen that from him in the past as well. The running backs I'm less inclined to stack with the QB is like the Derrick Henry with like a Levis or with Tannehill, where it's just a running back who basically has zero chance of being involved in the passing game unless it's like an outlier situation. But Jonathan Taylor has the actual potential to be targeted 5-6 times, which I view some of these guys as like an extension of a wide receiver. The one that stands out the most this year is obviously Alvin Kamara. We had games early in the year where he was getting targeted like 13, 14 times and be the most targeted player on the entire slate. And then when people are like, well, I don't want to pair a running back with a quarterback, it's like, all right, but he's getting targeted 14 times. You might as well consider him to be a wide receiver type player in that situation.
Yeah, Taylor getting targeted about a 20% target per out run rate on the year. That's, I think, right there with anybody else on the team for the most part. Pittman's at 28%, Downs at 23.4%. So you're right in that mix. Again, I still think you can get there even if he had, less than 5 catches in that game, just because the entire offense is moving the ball downfield. You're seeing big production for Pittman, 4 downs, and then Taylor can punch in the touchdowns there, and he can find a way to get through all there. But I don't mind that Indianapolis stack. I mean, we've seen Tampa Bay give up big production in the past. I've even played Will Levis in the past against Tampa Bay, just in the hope of trying to capture the best parts of him against Tampa Bay defense that doesn't defend the pass well. So to me, Indianapolis very live as a team. I just don't think you need to play it strictly through Taylor, which the ownership seems like it's indicating.
All right, so let's look at some of these quarterbacks now, Jacob, and we'll filter by the QBs. We'll look at the quarterbacks we're building stacks around, and then after that, we'll look at some of the QB exposure. And by the way, just like a sneak peek there at Jonathan Taylor, who's basically like an all-in play for the Sims, according to the current data, where if you guys saw that pop up very quickly on the screen, he was in 94% of our top 150 lineups there. And then we'll also do some stuff by looking at what we end up getting with Royce Freeman, and we could filter some of him out as well. But we're looking at some of these. So this is kind of surprising because I didn't see very many Tampa Bay stacks that are at the top of our simulated ROI, but still we're getting to about 20% of Baker Mayfield, which is also kind of an interesting way to get exposure to Jonathan Taylor, is by playing the other side of the game and having him as a run back. I assume that's probably why we're going to do as much Jonathan Taylor as we are, but we're really condensed at QB. There's only 5 guys that are really getting to here, Spags: Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Gardner Minshew, Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence. Does that surprise you at all? Do any of those players being the QBs that we're building around stand out to you as being guys that maybe you didn't expect to be in as many lineups?
Baker's surprising, but he's been grading out well for me all year because he's an efficient passer. He's, above average in terms of EPA. He also runs about 4 times per game as well. Takes about 4 deep shots per game. So he does enough. And Indianapolis on the year does give up the most explosive plays in terms of the pass game as well. So like there is a logic on multiple levels to go to Baker Mayfield, but it's obviously going to be pretty jarring whenever you see that much ownership for Baker. But like the pass catchers were good. Like you basically don't need Baker himself to have a 30, 40 fantasy point day. You need him to be a vessel for Mike Evans to put up 40 and maybe Cade Otton to put up 10 to 20 or Godwin to put up 20 to 30. And I think that's where he does make sense. And like Greg mentioned as well, we're using him as a bring back or using him as the stack. That's kind of your base there, where you're bringing Taylor as a bring back will be a different way to play that ownership and get a lower owned lineup with it. So I get the logic. I think that people though will be gun shy. Like, Christian Watson came up a lot in the Sims and he ended up being 20% owned because people are like, I can't play Christian Watson. He's been terrible. I think Baker's going to be a little bit of that, where if he's a strong Sim play and people just can't force themselves to get there, I'd be willing to play Baker a good amount.
In our data, if you guys have been building lineups in the Sims the entire year, has generally been fairly high on Baker Mayfield. Like I remember right off the bat, week 1, even you and I, Spags, we were DMing about it. If you remember this before the start of the season, you're like, hey, are you getting to a lot of Baker Mayfield when you're running Sims? I was like, yeah. And it was for, both of us, the first time we were using it. It was a new product this year. And I've noticed that throughout the years that we've generally been higher on Baker Mayfield than the field and the industry on a lot of weeks. And he's been pretty solid this year. I think whatever people's expectations could have been a Baker Mayfield, he's probably exceeded most of them, right?
Yeah, and I think too, he's just going along for the ride where if you're playing Baker Mayfield, it's just helping you cut that parlay of your lineup. And if you find the needle in a haystack, that is that outlier day for Evans or Godwin, but I think in particular Evans, you are going to see Baker just rise with that. So I think he makes a lot of sense, and I think it's certainly weird to see him and Jalen Hurts be 1-to-1 here in terms of the exposure, but that's sort of what the Sims are going to allow you to get to. It's not the most comfortable plays. It's not even sometimes the best plays in terms of how you perceive it, but it's about what can actually give you a shot, to beat all those lineups. And a Baker double, Baker triple. I mean, triple might be pushing it, but Baker double, I think would feel pretty good.
And are there any quarterbacks that we're not getting to here? Because once again, we've got 5 quarterbacks, 12+% owned in our lineups. And then the next most popular one, at least in our top 150 lineups we ran here, is Kyler Murray at 2.7%. Now, also keep in mind, if you guys are just tuning in now, you forgot we did before, just because of all the uncertainty with the situation with the Rams, we did filter them out. So Stafford would have been another quarterback we were getting to here, but removed him with the uncertainty with Cooper Kupp, and then not exactly sure what Kyron Williams' role is going to be. But are there any quarterbacks that are not making into lineups here that you feel like we should be getting into more lineups?
I'm curious about CJ Stroud. We're seeing Trevor Lawrence be one of the top picks here that's getting a lot of exposure. Stroud in this spot, we know Houston's been passing above expectation the last few weeks. Obviously, they were also a chalk bust last week. Not really, I think, not the worst game, but it was a 3-pick game for CJ Stroud, so that just did enough to keep them from getting where they needed to go. But I think in a spot where they have to compete and have to put up a lot of points against Jacksonville, I expect Houston to be passing a lot, and they still have a 23.3 point implied total. So it's not the biggest one, but it is one that still can definitely lead to an outlier day if they just beat that by a few points, let alone by a touchdown. So for CJ Stroud, I've been willing to play him every week, and I know the price is getting pretty uncomfortable at 7,700 on DraftKings is pretty tough nut there, but I think that's still one where for tournaments and on a short slate, like Stroud could beat any of these guys, I think, with the stack.
Yeah, and let's see, what is his latest projected ownership? I'm refreshing our ownership, and he's actually not showing up on the page here because none of our top 150 lineups had CJ Stroud, which is why he isn't being displayed there, and he is projected for 4% ownership in this matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So not popular, obviously, but like it's not like he's completely contrarian where he's only like 1% owned or anything like that. So I feel getting to him a little bit, but nothing really crazy. Jacob, if you could select the stack exposures button over there, and let's see what combinations we're getting to with these quarterbacks in terms of are Jalen Hurts lineups primarily single stacks or double stacks, or is it something else going on here? So sort by single stacks to begin with. And in general, our data typically doesn't love single stacks all that often. Yeah, scroll up a little bit. And this is actually more of them than I typically see show up. So we have, what is that, about a third of our lineups actually are single stacks. And it does make sense if you look at what these quarterbacks are, Spags. Jalen Hurts, super expensive. And his pass catchers, also very expensive. And Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, even though Smith hasn't had the best season this year, and he's been a disappointment relative to what people thought he was going to be coming into the year, and he's been a massive disappointment relative to his best ball ADP, he's never seen a decrease in price on FanDuel or DraftKings. And it's something that Lawfy and I in the show have talked about a lot, where he'll say like, this is going to be a Devontae Smith week, and he wants to do an ROI boost to get some more of Devontae Smith. And you really do have to force him in because his prices always remain pretty exorbitant. So we've got him priced at $7,100 on DraftKings. So it does make it hard to make double stacks of Jalen Hurts. And then as for Patrick Mahomes, we got Mahomes here in 11% of lineups. He makes sense to stack with Travis Kelce. And then it's so hard to know what to do with any of his pass catchers because the wide receivers, number one, they generally suck. And then number two, Mahomes spreads the ball out so much that it's always been difficult to nail down who the wide receivers are you want to pair him with. So there are some lineups here that are double stacks of Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, but we are getting to more of single stacks of them. Is that also how you prefer to play Mahomes and Hurts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like I haven't played a lot of Mahomes this year other than on the showdown slates where you have to play him a little bit more. But even then, I feel like I've been taking his pass catchers more. I kind of think he's been, and this is like, feels like blasphemy, but I feel like he's been mispriced this entire year where for best ball, obviously it's a big part of what I do for my outlay of throughout the course of a year. And he was being drafted like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and he's just not that player. Like he's not going to run enough times. And, Josh Allen's run less this year, but you still have seen higher ceilings for Josh Allen than you have seen for Mahomes for the most part. Same thing for Jalen Hurts as well, who gets there, finds a ceiling, finds a floor very often because of the rushing upside. Whereas Mahomes, he has to create that value by having concentration of the stack. And if Taylor Swift's not in attendance, that concentration of the stack is not there of his guys. So I'm not crazy about Mahomes. I get why he would be coming up a lot against the Raiders, but Raiders find a way to muck up games. Like, I don't know. I don't want to pay an expensive Mahomes where the stack is also not clean because, I like Kadarius Toney, but he's not getting enough reps. Rashee Rice came back down last game. Like, you really would just have to go, to Mahomes and Kelce, and that's not exactly sneaking up on anybody.
If you had to play Mahomes with one of his wide receivers, who would be your choice this week? Because I actually do have somebody in mind, and I'm curious who yours is, if you even have one.
I guess it would be Rashee Rice. I mean, I'm so in the bag for Kadarius Toney where I really thought that he was going to take a rise upwards. So seeing him get more work last week, I thought was a positive, it didn't result in a big fantasy game, but it would probably be for me, one of Rashee Rice or Toney, but it's Kelce really, obviously, if for anything you do Chiefs wise.
If I'm going to go to a wide receiver, it is going to be Kadarius Toney. Like if I had to pick one this week, because one thing we saw from last week, would you mention it wasn't the best fantasy game? He was pretty explosive from a real life perspective. Off the top of my head, he had like 3 or so really good punt returns where he broke a handful of tackles. He made plays happen. And this is very narrative based, which, is not necessarily what is happening in the Sims tools. But if I was Andy Reid and the Chiefs coaching staff, would you not look at some of those punt returns and say, let's try to get a couple of extra plays for Kadarius Toney in the offense this week? Let's try an end around to him. Let's try to get him a couple of screen passes because last week was as good as he's looked the entire season. There was some promise for him coming into the year, and he was so shitty in week 1 where he had all the opportunity in the world and simply could not catch the football. I think he had, what was it, 3 or 4 really key drop passes in that first week of the season. That was really, the Chiefs lost that game in the opening night to the Lions solely because none of the wide receivers could catch the ball with Travis Kelce out. So I kind of think there is a sneaky amount of upside in Kadarius Toney because he did look really explosive last week.
Yeah, and he also played the most snaps that he's played in a month. Last time out, played 22 snaps in that last game, which is not a lot. Certainly not enough to really put a lot of your bankroll and say Kadarius Toney's a guy I'm going to live and die by on the week. But I agree. I thought he had a good amount of juice in that game against the Eagles, and he has historically. Obviously, remember the big plays made in the Super Bowl. But I thought also the deliberate touches he was getting. McCole Hardman got banged up in that game as well, though came back in. So maybe that resulted in a little bit more work going Toney's way. But I think he's a part of things that they need to get going heading into the playoffs, just because he does represent something different where he is both a bruiser, but also elusive in a way that Rashee Rice is I think a good receiver who's going to be good for the next few years and probably get better, but he doesn't have the same skill set as Kadarius Toney. So and Sky Moore, we know, doesn't have that either. McCole Hardman kind of does, but it's not the same. Toney's got a little more brutality to his running style, I think is a positive. I like Toney in the spot. Just it seems like a situation where he could get 2 gimmicky touchdowns and that could be basically the majority of the offense for the day.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him to catch a 45-yard pass in the first play of the game and then also pull a hamstring on the play. So I'll be like, hey, look, I was right. And then it's also Kadarius Toney at the same time because he's had a shocking lack of in-game absences this year. That was the calling card of Kadarius Toney, where he looks like he's going to break a slate and then he gets hurt after the first quarter. We haven't had one of those this year. I'm ready to be hurt by it again. So Kadarius Toney, somebody who I'm willing to be pairing with Patrick Mahomes this weekend. Sort of some of those double stacks here, Jacob. I want to see what we're getting to the most as far as double stacks go. And Yeah, a lot of this is Baker Mayfield. And then if we look over at the triple stacks, that's where Gardner Minshew is coming. And although we are getting to some double stacks of Minshew as well, but it's Baker Mayfield who's really showing up a lot in these double stacks, which makes sense to me. If we do see a big game out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, and it is going to be Baker Mayfield throwing the football, like the players here relative to their talent level are not crazy expensive, where we've seen Mike Evans a lot of upside this year. Like we've seen guys like Chris Godwin. Of course, we know that he has upside, and nobody's priced all that expensively. So I really don't mind getting to double stacks here of Baker Mayfield. And if he does have a pretty big passing game, because we know that he's not somebody who's going to be going out and running the ball, like 10, 12 times or anything like that, there's definitely a path here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to not only put up a lot of points through the air, but then also with Jonathan Taylor as a potential run back on the other side, for him to also be a very viable piece of the game stack.
Yeah, or you could just go Bucks and not play Taylor as part of it as well and get Rashad White, maybe a little more checkdowns going his way. I think there's a lot of ways to stack up Tampa Bay, which is part of why you get him a lot in the Sims. And pretty much, I think every week at least, I've had some portion of Baker Mayfield in the lineups just because of what he represents in terms of getting all these guys there. I think there's a lot of outs where I'd say probably my most appealing duo with Baker would be, I think, Rashad White with Mike Evans, but you're going to get some amount of Cade Otton, you're going to get some amount of Chris Godwin, like I mentioned earlier. I think it's a nice spot for Baker. I don't want to be the one that plants the flag for Baker and says, yeah, this is the guy you have to play this week. But I think it makes a lot of sense in a game where it should be competitive. And we have seen both teams have outlier offensive performances, and also the defenses give up outlier performances to the opposing teams.
Yeah, for sure. So Baker Mayfield, we are getting the most of him in double stacks, 12.7% of lineups here of our top 150. Baker Mayfield double stacks and some triple stacks, 3%. So nothing crazy, but there are a few of them mixed in. Is there anything else here on screen that stands out to you? If not, we could take a look at some of the running backs and all the crazy chalk Jonathan Taylor we're getting to.
I guess Trevor Lawrence is the one thing where I just haven't been on him this year. He finally had the one good game last week that I know paid off a lot of people out there who've been big fans of his, and then they just keep playing him because he hasn't gotten there at all. Finally gets there. I think there could be something to Trevor Lawrence with having Zay Jones back in the mix. There's been a popular theory from a lot of the film watching bros out there that having Zay Jones in the mix will open things up for Ridley. I don't know that I have the strongest take on that, but it did feel like that was the best version of Trevor Lawrence last week, and I'm not sure that we'll see it again. I kind of have some concern with Doug Peterson teams and how they do kind of slowly start to lose efficacy over the course of the time period that he's the coach. But for him showing an upside, for him to be coming in not too crazily owned, I think Trevor Lawrence is kind of an interesting play in a week where I usually don't find Trevor Lawrence to be an interesting play.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening with some of the Calvin Ridley exposure when we get to wide receiver as well. I'm kind of lower on the idea that Zay Jones is a massive benefit to Calvin Ridley, because I think a lot of it is just based on box scores. People like, look, Calvin Ridley, all his big games are with Zay Jones. But then me, as being somebody who just thinks about these things a little bit more logically and isn't, like grinding film or anything like that, Calvin Ridley, the games he's played with Zay Jones, been like 3 of them this year, 4. It's a very small sample size, although basically everything with football is kind of a small sample size. But just to me, Zay Jones is somebody who is a very talented wide receiver that commands a target share. I would think over the long sample size, Zay Jones is just, in him being in the starting lineup, means less targets would have to go to Calvin Ridley. But maybe I'm just totally wrong on that. But is that like logical to you to think that Calvin Ridley should see less targets if Zay Jones is on the field?
I think it's more the route composition that makes up what Ridley's doing out there. When you have Zay Jones in, he doesn't have to run some of those routes that he just can't get open on anymore. And I know there was some of the next gen stuff with, the route trees where you could see there where he did run a different smattering of routes as well this past week than he has run the last few weeks without Zay Jones. So I agree that like a Zay Jones theoretically does take production away, but Ridley just needed somebody to open up space for him. And that's not Christian Kirk. It has been Evan Ingram, and Ridley himself just isn't like a man coverage beater. He's not a guy that's going to make big contested catches anymore. So you kind of need to scheme him to get good touches. So I get the logic of it, but I do agree that obviously like when the pie gets smaller, the pie is smaller. So you kind of then need the efficacy, the efficiency to be a little bit higher.
And if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just take a half second to do it. And if you want more information, analysis, and like Spags said, also best ball takes. We don't do a ton of best ball on this channel, but there's a lot of best ball. Chris Spags over at Splash Play Pod. So especially, and I know that we're not thinking about best ball a ton this year, although there's probably going to be some pretty cool playoff best ball contests that are coming up in the near future. So go check out the Splash Play plot. But I really got myself twisted on that.
You were doing so well. I appreciate the plug. But yes, I'm going live right after the stream too. So if you want to make the leap over, always trying to steal some Stokastic viewers away to get there, to get to my 3K subs to compete with the 1/3 of the audience, or 1/30th of the audience that Stokastic has. But yes, please go check out Splash Play. And thank you to Greg for flubbing that one down the home stretch.
Yeah. I mean, we were good all the way and then tripped rounding third base, which happens sometimes. You fall right on your face, which what I really did there. But I mean, if you try to say Splash Play Pod fast when you're kind of just, trying to do something where it's like, I got to do something for Spags. I want to make sure he came and filled in for me. I want to make sure that I could go and promote him a little bit. And I was just like, well, I should do this, and then just totally fucked it up there. But anyway, Spags doing great content over on the Splash Play Pod with our friend Pete Overzet as well. So go check those guys out over there. Let's look at some of the running backs now, and we'll try to navigate what's happening with this super chalky Jonathan Taylor, because there's different ways that you can approach the running backs. And the way that we are doing it right here in the Sims is apparently just getting to all of the Jonathan Taylor. He actually ended up being 42.2% owned, according to the contest generator here. And we are still getting to him nearly universally. Almost all of our lineups, 94% of our top 150 lineups have Jonathan Taylor in them. You see over here, we've got him projected for 21 fantasy points, Spags. So I know that you've mentioned that in lineups that are maybe not game stacks, you're a little bit less inclined to get to Jonathan Taylor. So what are some of the things that you might be doing to get yourself away from Jonathan Taylor in some of your lineups?
I mean, you look at this group of the highest exposed running backs, and there really isn't one here where I go, I need to play this guy more. So I guess that's kind of the concern point I would have. What I'd be looking at is trying to move to a different price point just to get away entirely from what people will be kind of forced to with Jonathan Taylor. I imagine based on his projection as well, he's going to come up 100% in an optimizer, which means that people land on him naturally as well, just because of the math of the play. So look, sim-wise, 94% is very hard to ignore. You don't see sim numbers like that for running back too often. And I certainly don't want to say I would go, substantially away from what the sims are saying. But to me, I can't imagine having him in more than half my lineups, just because that median projection, if he crushes it, it's going to be a great day. If he even just hits the median projection, he'll be there. If he gets you 15, you're kind of drawn dead. So I don't know. I don't have the faith in Jonathan Taylor that the Sims do, but the Sims do. And I never want to go against the Sims. I don't know if you feel this way, Greg, but it's I don't want to go, this tool that's won people so much money, including Greg, is wrong here. But also it is a little bit of a personal choice thing there.
I played a Packers triple stack in single entry yesterday. And I was actually tweeting about the Packers a little bit yesterday during Thanksgiving, and somebody responded to I ran Sims, and the top lineup I got to was a Packers triple stack. Funny enough, it was actually the exact same lineup I played, and he had said, I didn't play it. I couldn't pull the trigger because I didn't like it. And that's something that for me, I've just gotten really comfortable with. Hey, I'm probably not nearly as smart as what the data and the computers are, because these lineups are simulated against each other 40,000 times. And I've become really inclined to just kind of trust what the data gives me, as opposed to trying to tinker with it too much. Now, for something like this, where, we're building lineups ahead of time, we've got Royce Freeman in a bunch of lineups right now, and both you and I are expecting Kyren Williams to play and him to likely be the lead back for the Rams. So if something like this was popping up, which is not going to be popping up by the time Sunday rolls around, but for something like this, I would be inclined to be hey, let's just do a massive negative ROI boost on Royce Freeman, which actually, Jacob, let's show people how they would do that if somebody's watching the show for the first time or isn't familiar with the Sims. If you click on the ROI boost button, and then you can go just search he's right there towards the top, Royce Freeman. You could just be hey, let's just go negative 100% ROI Royce Freeman, or something super aggressive. And then if you do a boost ROI on it, and then you, just boost ROI there to the right. And then if you were to go back to lineups, and then unfavorite all of the top 150, and then favorite the top 150 again. And then, we still have the Rams that are in here, but that aside, then if you were to go back and looking at some of the lineups, we would have way less of Royce Freeman in lineups now than what we had before. So that's an easy way that you could quickly adjust some of your lineups. Where I'm most inclined to use is basketball, and there's super late breaking news, which happens 2-3 minutes before a game locks or a slate starts. Then there might be a really easy way to quickly patch up some of your player exposures. But in general, I just kind of trust what the data gives me. And to what you said also, a big thing about this slate is we go back and look at the running back positions. The other options kind of suck this weekend. Like, this is not the most favorable running back slate to where actually go back and filter by the running backs, Jacob. And then let's sort just by the projected fantasy points. And you'll see here the difference we have between Jonathan Taylor and everybody else. We got Saquon Barkley project for 17.61 fantasy points, Henry around 15 fantasy points, Bijan Robinson around 15 fantasy points. It's a really big gap between Jonathan Taylor and everybody else. And it's a kind of gap we don't see all that frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with that. I think to me, the way that I would try to do it, and this is what I usually do with the Sims, is I kind of go through from a stack level where I'll take lower owned stacks with it and hope that that allows me to get different guys in there where you will see, again, a Gardner Minshew sometimes with Jonathan Taylor, but you also will see then Baker Mayfield with Rashad White and then Mike Evans, and you're not getting Taylor in that build because the prices don't work. So that's how I try to get different from some of these, really highly exposed guys. But obviously Taylor, I would agree, like he's a tier above. Like I don't trust Saquon. I think Saquon had, I think Saquon's not great overall, but I also think that he had usage that I just don't think he gets against any other team with the pass game work that he got in that last game. And maybe that's a change. Maybe that's something they keep doing. But like Bijan, Derrick Henry, I still think overall for a tournament, like I'm always willing to take the flyer on can the field beat the one guy? And that's always kind of a risk point because you can still make winning lineups with the one guy. But at running back in particular, that's a lot of ownership for a running back.
It is a whole lot of ownership for running back. And, the push and pull here, like we're saying, is, well, if you're not playing Jonathan Taylor, who are you playing at running back? And that's what else we'll look at here. So let's sort by exposures now that we've really aggressively lowered Royce Freeman, see what else we end up getting to. And, we've got other guys here that are projected for not nearly as much as the ownership that Jonathan Taylor is, where it's, Javonte Williams project for 16% ownership. We're getting to him in 32% of lineups. They're getting to some of Derrick Henry, 19% of him, 16% of James Conner. Conner's one that really interests me personally, Spags. He got off to a great start this season, and that was with Joshua Dobbs at quarterback. I know that Dobbs has ended up being better than any of us could have expected he was going to be this year, but he's not Kyler Murray. And it does stand to reason that with the Cardinals now having the offense, with Kyler Murray, they got a fairly healthy receiving core. Like, this is a more talented offense on paper, and I think a lot of people realize what they actually are. And I do think that James Conner is somebody that could really, as one of my contacts just fell out. So James Conner is somebody who I think could really end up having a big close to the season. And I don't know that he's really being recognized in that kind of way. So it's not like he's completely contrarian, but I do like getting to him and getting slightly overweight to the field at his current projected ownership.
Yeah, you could talk me into a little bit of James Conner. I kind of feel like Kyler being back in does hurt a little bit of the upside of Conner because we do see Kyler taking some of those runs away. In the RPO stuff that we have seen the Cardinals deploy, it is a little bit more of Kyler keeping it than Josh Dobbs did, even though Dobbs certainly are running at a high level as well. But I think for Conner, he certainly makes sense. The Cardinals, for whatever reason, they should be absolutely playing to tank right now. They're not doing that at least yet. So in a spot against the Rams where it's a competitive game, I'm with it. One guy I don't see coming up sim-wise, though, that I would highlight, I think Jerome Ford, kind of interesting given the workload and the matchup against Denver. Denver, a team that to me has gotten like horseshoe up the butt kind of lucky recently, where they're giving up these games where it's like 20 points, 25 points, but it's like one catch away from it being completely busted wide open, one play broken away. Josh Allen, that one game that he had against Denver, it was just like he got really unlucky. He had one egregious pick in that game, but for the most part, it's guys passes off the hands, those turning into picks. So for me, I think Jerome Ford, Cleveland defense, you know what they can do. I'm a little bit intrigued by that one, but the rest of these guys, I feel like I would just take a smattering of whomever and just hope one of them works out.
One other thing I want to bring up to you before we kind of open up and see if there's any contrarian running backs you might like is Kyren Williams. We were going to do a bunch of Royce Freeman before, but once our data is all updated and assumes that Kyron's going to be the starting running back as opposed to Royce Freeman, I'm not exactly sure what his ownership is ultimately going to end up looking like. But are you willing to take chances on Kyren Williams coming back from injury when you consider that, hey, if our data really liked Royce Freeman, like there's a chance we might end up liking Kyren Williams a decent amount?
Yeah, I would absolutely take that shot. I think Kyren Williams, the workload for him, the red zone work in particular, where let me see if I actually have these numbers handy. Okay, Kyren Williams has 5.2 intended red zone touches per game, 2 inside the 10-yard line per game. Obviously, he has been hurt, so maybe you see a little bit of a decreased workload, but he has like a McCaffrey adjacent role. Like it's not quite as good, not as good of a team, obviously, but especially if you have Kupp out, like I think that does consolidate the targets a little bit more for Puka and for Kyren Williams. So I think Kyren, if the projections do catch up with where what the usage was previously. Like, I think he's a smash play against an Arizona defense that doesn't defend anything well, but in particular, I think a kind of multifaceted tool like Kyren Williams, I think can be deployed in a lot of ways against them, and I like him a lot.
And the other thing too, which is very important to this, is if Cooper Kupp isn't playing. Do you remember the target share that we're seeing out of Kyren Williams in the early going of the season in some of those games without Cooper Kupp? We saw in a game where they were trailing against the 49ers in week 2, double-digit targets for Kyren Williams. He was targeted 10 times. In the follow-up game against the Bengals, another game where they were playing from behind, he got targeted 7 times. So we've seen in games without Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams can get targeted 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So he is somebody who, if we do end up getting to some Matt Stafford lines, like, wouldn't mind having Kyren Williams paired with Matt Stafford in some of those, assuming we don't get any kind of news that Kyren Williams is going to be limited in any kind of way.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think a Kyren Puka stack would have a lot of appeal, assuming that we are, and I would take the assumption that coming off the IR stint, I think we also had an extra week of Kyren being out. Like, he's got to be as ready to go as he can possibly be, and they really did treat him like a bell cow on a level that really not a lot of running backs have held on to that usage. So for Kyren, I think he would make Stafford stacks appealing, but also, like, to me, you could play Kyren and Puka and then add another stack on top of that, and I wouldn't hate it either.
And are there any other running backs here that maybe we're not getting to a really contrarian you might be inclined to do, like an ROI boost too, to force them into a couple lineups?
I would say Jerome Ford is definitely the one that stands out the most to me. Besides that, I know the chat likes ATN, saw that coming up a little bit. I'm not the hugest guy on ATN. I think he kind of ran pretty lucky with his build, but don't mind that. DeAndre Swift is another one as well, where I think the game could end up going well for them. Obviously, some risk there with Buffalo being a new team, obviously new offensive coordinator, new play caller, all that with Joe Brady. So maybe they hang in there a little bit more. But if you do see Buffalo not keep up, I think you could see an easy 20 touches for DeAndre Swift, just them, taking advantage of the Bills. And Swift has been good in those kind of spots. So he'd be one. And Rachaad White, too, I think is a little bit low given how much Baker that we were getting earlier.
Yeah. And then also somebody who, if you were looking to make just like a mini game stack, even that doesn't include some of the quarterbacks from that game, like if you had Rachaad White and Jonathan Taylor in the same lineup, Rachaad White's getting a ton of workload this year. He's not been efficient, but we know he's going to be on the field a ton. He's going to be involved in the run game. He's going to be involved in the pass game. He's kind of found ways to be successful, even independent of game script. So Rachaad White and Jonathan Taylor in the same lineup, like another way you could correlate some players. Let's go ahead and look at the wide receivers now here, Jacob, and we'll see what wide receivers are that we're getting the most exposure to. And also, while we're pulling this up for you guys one more time, haven't done it, do us a favor by liking the video and subscribing to the YouTube channel. And one other Black Friday deal. We also have Odd Shopper, totally new, revamped Odd Shopper package. We are going to be including expert picks now on Odd Shopper. So if you guys are going to want bets from myself, we're going to have in the next couple of days a page up where it's like some of my favorite bets of the day, some of Eric's favorite bets, if for some reason you're looking for those, or, Ben Roz's favorite bets, Matt Kajeski, a lot of the guys on the team, we're going to be posting our favorite bets to Odd Shopper, in addition to all of the existing projections we have over there, the market-based plus EV model. And if you sign up now, you're going to get 50% off when you sign up using the promo code Black Friday, all capital letters, Black Friday. And that gets you 50% off your first subscription. And we've also lowered the price of Odd Shopper down to $50. So you're going to be getting it for right around $25 when you sign up for the first time. So a really good deal. And we're really excited to be getting more people into Odd Shopper. We want to build up a community. We're getting a ton of people into our Discord, a ton of people using the product. And we think this is the best way to do it here at the Black Friday deal. And that is going to be expiring on Monday. So you only have a few days to sign up. So take advantage of it if you're looking for some bets. Sign up at Odd Shopper using that promo code Black Friday for 50% off. Wide receivers now, Spags. Let's see what's showing up at wide receiver. And right away, I'm noticing a ton of Cooper Kupp, which, you and I are both kind of skeptical whether he's going to play or not. So let's just kind of say, let's get more information before we make a determination on Cooper Kupp. Look at the amount of Juju we're getting to. This is shocking to me. I have not thought all that much about Juju this week, and he's showing up in like 4/5 of our lineups. What do you make of this Juju exposure?
I guess I get it, going against the Giants, certainly a hospitable matchup. Juju, 3K minimum, so that definitely helps as well. 3K minimum salary doesn't get you, as Greg can attest, doesn't get you as far as it does on an NBA slate, where that guy can absolutely not kill a lineup sometimes, and you still, even if they have a midday, like whatever. But for football, there's opportunity cost that goes along with it. But Juju, what were snaps? Because I think that's something that would help me. Juju, bye last time out, 68 snaps the game before their bye. So did play a lot. He has been certainly the most, I would say, professional receiver in the core. Pop Douglas, I think, is a little more juice, but Juju's been reliable, getting targeted about 11% of the time he's on the field. Douglas, 19%. Man, I kind of think Douglas is the better play, but he is a little bit more expensive at 4,400. So I get it with Juju. I just, Juju, the best days are certainly in the past, I would say, for Juju at this point.
The one thing I have noticed with the Sims and the Patriots receivers is there were days where it's given me like, hey, 50, 60% Kendrick Bourne. I'd be like, do I really want to play this much Kendrick Bourne? And then I just ride with it. And then he's had ceiling games. So generally, as shitty as Mac Jones has been this year and as bad as the wide receivers have been for the Patriots, there have been a lot of individual outlier days relative to some of the price tags on these guys. Because like you mentioned, Juju, flat min price. That was the same thing with Kendrick Bourne some slates early in the year. He was like $3,800, picking up 8% ownership, making to like half my lineups in the Sims. And then you go out and you get targeted like 10 times, catch 8 of them, have, 90 yards and a touchdown or something like that. So this might be one where if I was actually getting to 85% of Juju right at lock, I might give him a little bit of an ROI boost downgrade just so I don't get to this quite amount of the exposure to him. But I understand why he's a good points per dollar play on the slate and not all that popular either, where we're getting him in, 11% projected ownership here, according to the contest generator. Here's a player that I think you are probably going to like a good amount based on some of the analysis you gave before. Michael Pittman is our 4th most rostered wide receiver. Is it safe to assume that you like him as a little bit of a pivot / leverage play off of Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, he's been really reliable. A lot of my Pittman love came from the hopes and dreams that Anthony Richardson represented, but I do think that we've kind of stabilized a little bit more with Gardner Minshew, where the ceiling is probably not quite as high, and Pittman has kind of bailed himself out. The one game I think it was like a month ago now, where he broke 75-yard touchdown. That made his day, like maybe a little bit of luck to that one. For the most part, for Pittman, we are seeing a good amount of targets on the year. For Pittman, he's at 9.8 intended targets per game or intended touches per game, and all of which are in the past game, so that's a positive. 1.6 red zone touches as well per game or intended touches. So like the workload's there for Pittman, and he's been pretty talented. And again, Tampa Bay just can't defend the pass well. So I do think that benefits Pittman the most. If Josh Downs is in, I think he's also in the hunt, but I like Pittman down stacks quite a bit and think those are really strong just because Alec Pierce is clearly like not even involved at all in terms of the workload. I guess maybe this could be a day that he does get there. But there's a lot of ways I think to get leverage on Jonathan Taylor or get him in teams with him. And I think Pittman would probably be my favorite Colts guy to pair with Taylor, especially if you're playing Minshew.
Yeah, and if you look through a lot of the other wide receivers, it's just guys that correlate to the quarterbacks we're getting to. Christian Kirk correlating with some of the Lawrence ownership we had. And by the way, here's some Demario Douglas as well. We've got Pop Douglas here in 13% of lineups. Puka Nacua, who we have in 14% of lineups. If Cooper Kupp does not end up playing, Nacua is going to be one of the more popular wide receivers on the slate. And is also somebody who's going to end up projecting just massively well. We saw what Puka is able to do earlier in the year without any Cooper Kupp in the lineup. And I mean, he was, a wide receiver 1 for fantasy purposes. So he would make a ton of sense if Cooper Kupp doesn't play. And then also Josh Downs showing up in some lineups. So we're actually overweight to like everything on the Colts in this. We're overweight to Minshew, overweight to Jonathan Taylor, overweight to Pittman, overweight to Downs as well. So we're getting to just a ton of the Colts across the board. Mike Evans also correlating with the Baker Mayfield, the same with Chris Godwin. Anything else that really stands out to you in some of these wide receiver exposures?
I definitely like to see all the cold stuff. Tank Dell's price tag coming up. I think that he makes some sense because I do have that interest in Houston, even though Jacksonville's defense has been good on the year. I just think that's a game that I think both sides are going to be spurred on to pass a little bit more in that one. Pickens, I'm surprised to see here, the change in offensive coordinator, hopefully going to be a positive thing for Pickens, but I don't know that I have that much faith because personally, I believe that people wanted to blame Matt Canada for a lot of stuff. I think it's more of a Mike Tomlin thing that we've seen the Steelers play this way for the most part for a decade now. Like, I don't know why we would blame the offensive coordinator, even though he certainly sucks and made some errors with how he approached things. But Pickens, I guess he could buy in. I just like, do you have any faith in the Steelers offense being better, Greg? Because I feel like there's at least this is the best shot we'll have it being better. But I just don't know with Pickett, with how he's played, with Pickens himself and Deontay Johnson. It's like too many mouths to feed and definitely not enough dropbacks to get there.
I think they're as likely to improve as Kenny Pickett's hands are to get bigger in the near future. So, and I know there was, it's funny that was such a big deal that it was made when Kenny Pickett was first getting drafted. The size of his hands, is it relevant? Is it not relevant? Who's to say? I do know that he's not played well since he's been in the NFL, which is really the biggest issue I have with the Steelers overall. And, as far as the Pickens exposure, we are a little bit underweight to the field on him. He actually was popping up in 9% projected ownership by the contest generator here. So we're a little bit underweight to the fields to him. He's shown to have big play upside, and he can have, even short passes where he ends up taking it to the house. We've seen probably like 2 or 3 big plays from this year. I know he did have one showdown slate where he totally wrecked the slate with like a 65-yard touchdown reception or something like that. So we are a little bit underweight to the field, but more neutral than anything on him. If he was in some lineups, I wouldn't really have too much of an issue with it. But we've only got a couple minutes left here, so let's really quickly check out the tight ends, and then we'll send Spags off to Splash Play, where he could continue talking about football.
Oh, it's living the dream here. I'm going to do a very similar process on Splash Play after this one, but it'll be fun there. So please come along here and give me some of these refracted spotlight of views from Stokastic.
And if you see the tight end exposures here, which I found this has happened to me, a lot this year, most of the tight ends suck. And then I've kind of concentrated on the tight ends that are actually decent that I want to play. And for this weekend, you'll see that we're getting to a bunch of Ingram, a bunch of Kelsey, a bunch of Trey McBride, a decent amount of Dalton Kincaid, and basically nobody else. And something else too, I've talked a lot about the Sims this year. Double tight end lineups are better in 2023 NFL DFS than they were in previous years. And it's for a number of reasons. Most notably, backup running backs are priced so much more aggressively in DFS this year than they were in previous years. The tight end just ends up being one of the better value spots, whereas a lot of people say, oh, but look how few milli makers it's won over the last few years. I don't think you could look at this year the same as a couple years ago, because we used to get 3K backup running backs. It'd be like 50% owned that were auto smash plays. And now those guys come in and they're like Kyron Williams is coming back from injury. He's $6,600 this week. A couple of years ago, he would have come back from injury and been like $3,800 or something. And it really does change the dynamic of DFS. And the number one thing I think that people should be doing, if you're not already, is playing some double tight end lineups. But any quick words you have on the tight ends before we finish up here?
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of Evan Ingram recently for the Sims. I get why. The red zone role for him is not that great this year. He's only had 1 red zone target on the year, unless something has changed recently, but I'm not even going to look it up, but I'm going to stand pat with that belief. But he's just been not getting there in a lot of lineups. I get why, he kind of comes up sim-wise. I think this is still not a dangerous amount of exposure being at 47%, but I do think Ingram comes with a little bit of a risk point just because you have so many guys taking touchdown equity away, whether it be ATN, whether it be Ridley, whether it be Christian Kirk, Zay Jones back in the mix. And even still, the Brenton Stranges of the world sometimes get a touchdown. The Luke Farrells of the world sometimes get out there and get some snaps away from Ingram. So I do have a little bit of a Ingram week again. But obviously that happens where he's had 2 weeks in a row where he's come up with the Sims and he'll hit in week 3. So I wouldn't want to run away from that one, but I have my concerns. Kelsey, the high price, I think is kind of interesting there because certainly paying down will then make you different from a lot of those Kelsey lineups right away. But it is a matchup against the Raiders where he should be able to get something going. I think these tight ends make sense. It's just the Ingram part I don't have the most love for, and the McBride part I probably have a little bit more love for.
All right, and that is going to do it for us today, guys. If you have not done yet, do us a big favor. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget our Black Friday deals. If you want to sign up for the Sims, 50% off using the link below in the promo code SIMS, SIMS, all capital letters. If you want to get access to Odd Shopper and all of our sports betting information, promo code for that below. Black Friday. Use that link to sign up and get yourself 50% off. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Go check out Spags on the Splash Play pod and have a great day. I'm going to be doing a lot more NFL analysis on the channel, so check it out. We've also got the Friday afternoon showdown slate, 2 to 3 p.m. show for that. So guys, good luck this weekend. See you back here next week.